of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority Transport and Infrastructure Committee. My name is Anna Smith and I am the chair for today. And I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today in Huntingdon, and also those who are watching our meeting from our live stream. Now, the Combined Authority does allow filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting should you so wish. Now, can I also ask that everyone present checks all of their mobile devices? I am doing likewise, in order to ensure that everything is on silent. It's the reality of the modern world, isn't it? And I would like to remind members and officers that this meeting will be recorded. So first of all, I have some welcomes to give. We are working currently on a new initiative, which is to ensure greater connectivity between our thematic committees and our business board by welcoming members of the business board to come to our meetings and contribute as non-voting members, I believe. But I'm very, very happy to welcome Andy Williams to this meeting. Welcome, Andy. Rebecca Stevens is also going to be a non-voting member of this meeting, but has sent her apologies for today. The item on the bus strategy, originally attended as an agenda item for this meeting, has been deferred to allow for further conversations to be had with operators. We therefore expect, given the number of remaining agenda items, that this meeting will, famous last words, finish earlier than usual. In terms of welcomes, I also just want to welcome all of the committee members who are here. So we have Councillor Nigel Simons from Peterborough City Council. Welcome to you, Councillor Simons. Welcome back to Councillor Neil Shaler from Cambridgeshire County Council. Welcome to Councillor Alan Sharp from East Cambridgeshire District Council. I know we're doing apologies later on the list, but welcome to Councillor Lara, now Davenport Ray, isn't it? Is that the right way around? Yes, who is our alternate from Huntingdonshire District Council. We have also Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson, who is attending as a committee member, speaking across the whole of the Combined Authority remit today, and it's a really fantastic initiative to be able to have the Mayor joining us in these meetings. And Councillor Chris Seaton, welcome back from Fenland District Council. Good to see you back. So we're now going to turn to apologies for agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence and declaration of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor MacDonald and from his sub-Councillor Mills, and also from Rebecca Stephen, the Business Board representative. Also from Councillor Wakeford, substituted by Councillor Davenport Ray, and from Councillor Milnes.
Okay, thank you. Now, does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in any items being considered today? And remember that you can disclose interests at any point during the meeting, so please do raise your hand and let us know. So we now move on to item 2. And item 2 is the election of vice chair for the committee. Now, we have a slightly unusual situation here. I have had interest expressed in the vice chair role from Councillor Wakeford from Huntingdonshire District Council, who was unable to be here in person. We have his sub-Councillor Davenport Ray with us, who I believe is going to say a few words now. Councillor Davenport Ray, I believe you wish to make a nomination.
Yes, I would like to nominate our usual member, Councillor Wakeford, as vice chair. I think looking at the work program of this group over the next year, it's really important that we have a chair from an urban area and we have a vice chair from a rural area, and that mix of representation is really important. And Huntingdonshire would like to represent that. And Councillor Wakeford is online in case you have any doubts as to his willingness to take on the role. His face does appear there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should point out that Councillor Wakeford is unavoidably detained with his duties at Adderbrooks Hospital this morning, which is why he's not here and why he's joining us online. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shaler. Do we have any other nominations for the post of Vice Chair? Councillor Wakeford, are you happy to accept the nomination?
I am, and can I reiterate my apologies for not being able to be with you in person this morning?
Thank you. Now, as there's one nomination, do I need a vote or do we take this by assent?
Just if there's general assent,
Right. So I will take general assent around the room for that. So congratulations, Councillor Wakeford. You are now Vice Chair. Thank you for joining us remotely for that. So we're now moving on to item 3, and this is the approval of the minutes of the Transport and Infrastructure meeting on the 15th of March 2023. We're being asked to confirm these as an accurate record. If any member wishes to raise a question on the accuracy of these minutes only, can you indicate that now? Councillor Davenport-Ray, could you start?
At the March meeting, I was also representing Huntingdonshire. So in the section on councillors present, at the moment it mentions both Councillor Wakeford and myself. So we just remove Councillor Wakeford from the present.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Okay, I see no further objections, so I will take the minutes as approved and I will just sign those now. So those are now signed as an accurate record. Thank you. So we now move on to item 4, which are public questions. Now, I believe we have received one public question from Mr. Anthony Carpen. Now, I can see Mr. Carpen isn't in the room. Is he online? So will someone from Democratic Services please read his question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. The question is, sorry. Apologies, let me just get that question up. I've got the different question written here. 1 second. No, it's not. No.
Okay, I'm going to read that. I'm going to read the question and the answer out myself. So this is Mr. Carpen's question. Item 5, the Place and Connectivity Report, paragraph 2.3, Rail Summit, 7th of July, 2023. I went to the Rail Future East meeting in Cambridge last December, where Transport consultant Jonathan Roberts presented his findings on how to improve rail links in the east of England. See the summary on pages 4 to 8, and then a website link is given. What assessment have officers made of the analysis by Mr. Roberts? If they have not seen the report, please could I ask the CPCA to arrange for Mr. Roberts and Rail Futures East to brief officers in the committee and commission to the substantive report to be placed in the public domain if it is not already, and make the appropriate press publicity arrangements so that its findings can be shared more widely. Please note I'm not a member of Rail Future, but I am on their mailing list and support their calls for significantly improved rail networks. So that is the question from Mr. Carpen. Anthony, if you're watching, I'm now going to give the answer, or you'll be able to catch that up online later. So first of all, what I'd want to say is that personally I'm a big fan of Rail Futures and the work that they do. Now, in order to provide a truly sustainable and integrated transport network, rail absolutely has to play a key part in offering appropriate choices for people and businesses, especially I would say those involved in the movement of freight. It's easy to sometimes for us to think about rail as being a purely passenger issue, but it absolutely isn't. And we really, really need to get everything moving around on the rail network as much as possible. Now, the combined authority has been successful in attracting funding and focus from government and other partners in recent years, such as the opening of Soham Station, money for Cambridge South Station, and I'm going to mention our joint interest in getting the Ely area capacity enhancement sorted out as quickly as possible there as well. Now, as with all stakeholders, we absolutely value, as a combined authority, the great work that Rail Futures do, and there is a lot of really, really interesting research and work that they have commissioned and put together on their website and through their newsletters. It's essential that, as a combined authority, we continue to work with strategic stakeholders, such as Rail Futures, to promote, champion, and lobby for the necessary improvements with that rail network, and therefore the assistance of Rail Futures is going to be an absolute key in that approach, because it's only really when we speak as a region with one voice on this that we're going to be able to get government to support our vision for rail in this region. So I would therefore like to extend an invitation to Rail Futures to attend our Rail Summit in July, where they can be part of those conversations with elected members and officers. Thank you. Now, I'm assuming, as Mr. Carpon isn't here, there isn't a follow-up. So we will now move on to item 5, which is the Place and Connectivity Directorate Monthly Highlight Report. And Steve Cox, our Strategic Director, I believe, will be presenting this report. So, Steve, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Really delighted to bring this, I think, first Director's Highlight Report to the committee. An opportunity for us to update the committee on decisions that it's taken in previous meetings, key events that are coming up, and any policy announcements that are being made, and to make sure that everybody is up to speed with the progress that's being made across a number of areas. So I'll pick out a few highlights, and I'll just firstly thank the transport team for providing all the updates in here. I think it reflects a huge amount of work that's ongoing. A few highlights, just to bring it alive for the committee, I'll run through. So under events, you'll be aware we had the launch of the Zebra buses in Cambridge on the 12th of May, which was a tremendous, I think, milestone in the progress to electrify the bus network across the area. The jointly funded project between GCP, ourselves, Stagecoach East and government was behind that particular initiative. Also in the highlight report, I've indicated the progress that's being made towards the bus depot in Peterborough, a really important project that we've already secured £4 million towards, and we'll be working and are working with PCC colleagues to develop that project and define it and bring forward a solution that we can then seek further funding for to achieve that aspiration. Also coming up, we've got Active Travel England visiting on the 21st of June. I won't say much more on that. We have an item on the agenda that can go into a bit more detail about that. On the 7th of July, much as Mr. Carpen's question and the issues around rail will be highlighted at the Rail Summit on the 7th of July. Really looking forward to the focus that we need to bring to get messages across still further on the need for the Ely area capacity enhancement, a critical scheme, not just in Cambridgeshire, in East Cambs, but nationally. The connections that it enables between East Coast ports and the Midlands and the North, it's of national significance, and there is a really strong business case in place for that particular scheme. So we want to bring a real focus to that, as well as the important rail initiatives that we want to pursue and get funding for. For example, March to Wisbech is one. So that's on the 7th of July. We have a meeting planned with the Chief Exec of National Highways. The Mayor is meeting to discuss their activity within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So on that agenda will be the A14 and the issue of the dieback of trees and the plans to reinstate those, how that's going. Issues around littering across the National Highway network, we want to address that. And the A428, which is also in the highlight report, that will now progress and get going towards the end of the year. And I know, I think across the county, we want to make sure that the lessons that have been learnt from the A14 through diversion routes and the actual operation of the construction of the 428, that we minimise the impact of that absolutely to neighbouring and close by villages and communities. So that will be an important meeting planned, I think, for July. We're still to finalise the date for that. On the schemes update, areas within there that have been included, Peterborough Station Quarter, really important levelling up fund scheme that we're working closely with PCC to progress. The levy funding proposals are being developed for the 5.4 million of capital spend, and that is being progressed with the highway authorities initially to shape those proposals. On Soham Station, we've provided some details on passenger numbers in there. I will ask, if I can, Chair, Tim to come back to that point a little bit at the end of my introduction, if that's okay. The A10 update, there's quite a bit of detail in here. We wanted to make sure the committee were fully aware of the stages that we've reached in reviewing the SOBC that was previously done, and the work now towards the outline business case and the plans for stakeholder engagement over the summer on that important work that we need to make sure is compliant with DFT guidance if we're going to be looking for DFT funding. So a carbon-led approach to that is going to be important, but keeping all options clearly open on the table through that work. So that's, again, an important piece of work that's going on. The bus retendering, members may recall in March there was a delegation from the March board to enable retendering of services that operators had wished to surrender, and that's the update provided in the highlight report gives the details of those services. And then finally, two other, the A428 I've mentioned already, East West Rail. I think members will be aware of that announcement and the points that we've made about electrification being a really important part of the scheme when it finally comes forward. And then also to note the making connections decisions that are coming from GCP towards the end of June, that we'll be watching carefully on and continuing to work jointly with partners on that. So that's, Chair, an introduction to the highlight report. Maybe I could ask Tim to come back on the Soham Station numbers, and then happy to take any questions.
So just on the Soham Station numbers, the numbers that are included within the report are from the Office of Road and Rail. They are what defined as the footfall. So for normal stations, it wouldn't be a problem. So where there's a physical barrier, it's easy because you have the tickets going in and out of the machine. But actually, the ticket information that we've received from Greater Anglia has outlined that there's 57,000 people using the station, and that was from the 1st of June to 31st of May, 1st of June 2022 to 31st of May 2023. So that the actual numbers that are people using tickets for Soham Station is 57,000, but the estimate is for ORR that they know there that tend to be surveys, and that's fine, as I say, for areas that have physical barriers, but because we haven't got that at Soham, it's an estimate for ORR. So the actual ticket numbers are 57,000.
Thank you. So that's significantly up on the estimate numbers, basically. That's extremely good news. Now, do we have any questions on this item? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
First of all, I really like the format of this report. I think this is the first meeting where we've had it, and it's very helpful. In the section on 2.4, so the mayor is going to be meeting with the chief executive of the Highways Authority. I'm very happy to see the mention of the A14 planting there. I understand that the reason for some of the failures in the planting is due to deficiency of nutrients in the soil. And I think that National Highways plan is around replanting, but I'd really like them to consider perhaps the species that we need to plant need to be able to thrive in nutrient deficient soil and in hot conditions as we experienced last summer that will increase in the years to come. So rather than simply replacing the trees, thinking about what varieties they're using. It's such a visual symbol across all of our region, that new road and all of the planting that's happening there. The second question is about the Peterborough Station Quarter. There's a sentence in the report here about how the scheme is an integral part of the draft LTCP. Now that we know that the board has not yet approved an LTCP, that will inevitably cause delays. So I'm curious, what delays might we expect in that Station Quarter project because of that decision, and also all the other rural projects that I know lots of my residents, at least, are really looking forward to.
I'm going to take questions in sets of 3, so I'll take one more at this point. So, Councillor Sharp, you've indicated you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's touching on the A14, and it's around the rubbish along there. 'Cause I've got a group. I represent all of the villages that are in Cambridgeshire, but are south of Newmarket, and to the south and the west. And there is a very good group called Rubbish Friends who go out and collect litter from all of the lanes and everything else. And they've been trying to. They wanted to go and collect all the litter on the A14 when the roadworks were there, but they couldn't do it. So I welcome that. I also get it in the ear from them that Suffolk. As soon as we get into Suffolk, so all the Suffolk part of the A14 is brilliant, and that's what they're saying to me. So I just really think, for pride in our county, then I think that's something we should really try to push. And there are local groups who are prepared to do it. Thank you.
Mayor Dr. Nick, do you want to come in?
Well, I'm absolutely delighted, first of all, not to be the chair, so I can respond in a kind of immediate, speaking for the whole of Cambridge and Peterborough, and absolutely delighted that 2 members of the committee have immediately picked up on, obviously, one of the factors that Steve has mentioned in terms of the meeting with National Highways. Actually, in the campaign for me to be elected, littering along some of the main roads was actually a question I was had in many meetings, and it's taken a long time to kind of find a narrative within the combined authorities to how we can take this forward. I'm therefore very grateful with the new systems that we have, which are more responsive in terms of mayoral priorities, that this is something we can take forward quite clearly. As well as the big issue of trees, which is well known around the A14, and the importance of how we make sure that the same mistakes aren't repeated with the A428, or indeed other future road works in the area. We learn from that. But the problem of littering along these main highways is substantial. And I am absolutely delighted we can move forward with it. I think it's symptomatic, and hopefully, knowing, obviously, I know Councillor Schuyler's here, some of the work links in quite closely with the County Council, and I think it's symbolic and of how, as the combined authority works with its constituent members, something like the annoyance of the littering, the importance of how it gives a bad impression of the county, the pride that we can have in Cambridge and Peterborough. If it's something that we would deal with in a systemic and systematic way, then it's one that we should move forward on. And I would encourage people to hold all local authorities to account on this issue. So thank you for your interest.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. Tim, is there Steve, anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. If I just come back on the questions, so certainly with the trees, I think we will be pressing to find out what they're going to do differently, who they're going to work with, and the point about future-proofing, I think, is a really important one. So there is an obligation that runs for a number of years on national highways to make sure the trees are successful in their planting. So we will be looking for that detail, and we'll get those points across. On the LTCP, Peterborough Station Quarter, and actually quite a lot of other schemes, will have a much stronger policy backing for any future funding bids that we make into government. So government will be looking LTCPs when they're deciding on future investment priorities. So there's a range of initiatives across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that are in the LTCP that hopefully, once approved, will strengthen the case that we've got for securing support for those schemes. But also in the case of Peterborough Station Quarter, in getting other agencies who are critical to that scheme, National Highways, Network Rail, for example, making sure that they, and I'm no doubt that they will want to be engaging and delivering that scheme with us, are properly engaged and working to achieve the outcomes that we want from that particular project. So yes, it is important that we get the LTCP to approve, so it gives us a much stronger position to deliver. I think those were the two questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So Andy, and then Chris, and then Neil.
So thanks, Steve. I'd agree the report's really clear. Very much welcome the introduction of the zebra buses into Cambridge. I think from a business perspective and actually from a community perspective, actually a visible advert for sustainable transport is really important, and the sooner we can get those sort of buses out into the wider Cambridge and Peterborough area, the better, because that is, as well to the normal benefits, as an advert for where we're going. I think that's really, really important. I think I understood the answers of Soham Station, but what I didn't see was what was the estimate for the business case when it was first put forward. It's very difficult to look at these numbers in isolation and say what they are. And then I guess my question is, both for Cambridge South Station and for East West Rail, they were significant from the amount of business support they had and how much business were lobbying and supporting those projects. And I wonder if you have business representation at your rail summit next week, because it has been notable in the past that has had a significant impact on getting these projects progressed.
Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. I heard briefly mentioned the Wisbech to March rail in the presentation, and this report is active travel. And being from Fenland, of course, they have to be active because there are very limited bus services. There are obviously no rail link between Wisbech and March. And also, I note that the Rail Summit is coming up, which it says here is the 7th of July. One of my other roles is actually chairman of the Hereward Community Rail Partnership. So I would be very interested in being at that Rail Summit because that's obviously dear to both the partnership and obviously to Fenland District Council. But my question is really going back to the Wisbech March Railway. It was mentioned, but what is the way forward on this? Because we've had the grips, we've had the 2, 3, I don't know what we're on at the moment, but we seem to spend an inordinate amount of time, doing casework and past history, but nothing much else. So that is my question, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass on to Councillor Shaler, but just to confirm, and I've just confirmed this with Tim, that all members of TIC will be invited to the Rail Summit as members of TIC, so we should all be getting invitations through for that additionally. So, Councillor Shaler.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I also want to mention the trees along the A14 and keep in mind that we are looking to improve nature. It's not just a plantation, and these things normally go through progressions of species, and so we want to create an ecosystem. And to note that around 60% of the country's remaining flower-rich meadowland is in the highways asset. And also to note with the drying that we are seeing in the summer, while we have a no-mow May, we have to be a little bit careful of creating tinder situations for fires later on and think about fire breaks in the resulting forests along the asset. And this also relates to littering, and a single cigarette could cause immense damage. Just to mention that. On the zero emission bus launch, it was absolutely great. This was just before this part, and I want to add a comment that I've had from various people that we should look for 2 wheelchair places on these buses. It is a cause for concern when a wheelchair user has to worry about if that place is already taken on the bus. And I know there is space for pushchairs, but not exactly for wheelchairs. So some clarification on that would be really good. I too welcome the comment about West Beach Rail. That is, obviously we have to push that as far as we can. Also, the mayor's comments in the report on East-West Rail, talking about the Ely area enhancement. I think this is absolutely key to mobility in there, and also on electrification. On the Soham station, I found it a little bit difficult to compare the numbers. What is that good? Is it bad? And also, what are the possibilities for increase? Are there limits? And I know this is also relates to the Ely area enhancement, so it'd be nice to see what is possible. And I think I'll leave it there because the other elements are coming up later. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come back very briefly on the summit, and you've mentioned about the invitations and his point about the business community, just to make sure we've got the invitations out to make sure that the businesses are properly represented. And briefly on Zebra, Tim may want to come back on that particular question, but there is a further round, we think, of Zebra funding available. So we'll be making sure we are working with colleagues at Peterborough, particularly linked to the bus depot initiative, to bring forward a proposal for that funding as and when that opportunity arises. But perhaps Tim can pick up the other points.
Yeah, so I'll try and go through the number of the other questions that are posed, and if I forget any, then please remind me. So just specifically around Soham Station, so it is, in comparison with what the business case was, it is in line with where we thought it would be at this stage, and that is good news because the business case was put together ahead of COVID. So actually, we're further ahead than we thought we were going to be. But a number of comments have come back around the numbers. What I've suggested after the meeting is I can do a very simple comparison between what the business case was said, what the ticketing said, and what the ORR position, and explain what those differences are. So I'll do that, take that as an action. And then with regards to Wisbech to March rail scheme, so Matthew Lutz is putting a significant amount of effort into progressing that with Network Rail. We are looking at the option appraisal report, so I think Council Seaton's been involved in some of that. We just need to encourage that with Network Rail. So that's looking at the three options. So that's the heavy rail option, the light rail option, and also looking at some sort of autonomous pod. So looking at that's an option just to look at when things can be introduced, what time they can be introduced, what the cost is, and any deliverability issues. Specifically around the time frames on that, I can come back to Councillor Seaton and others around the specifics on that. But Matthew is working hard with Network Rail on trying to progress that option appraisal report. And then around the point around East West Rail, the point I would like to make is we have confirmed back to East West Rail is from day one we want it to be electrified, and therefore that is a key component, a part of our stance. We have, I believe, we agreed that at a previous TIC meeting, and that part of our stance going forward with East West Rail, the electrification needs to be there from stage one, but also the point is that it's a whole network, and we need to, yes, it's very good that we've got EFL coming, but it does mean that the importance of Ely capacity and the Hawley Junction and Snellwell Loop has all increased in importance, because it actually will put pressure on other parts of the network, and therefore we need to make sure that we are having a consistent message around rail improvements. And then the last point around the Zebra buses, I do believe, but I will check with Stagecoach, that each of those do have two wheelchair spaces. I think it's around the wrong way of policing, but actually making sure that the right people are using those facilities. But we'll talk to Stagecoach around how that's done going forward.
And my understanding is, yes, I went and had a look inside, and there are two wheelchair spaces, But the issue is that one of them also doubles up as the space that you could put prams. So the problem comes where it's that issue that I suspect as a committee we would all want to see designers of buses to keep working on here, which is not creating that conflict between different users who need that space. And I know there are some quite interesting examples. I believe Vienna, for example, has buses which has a section at the back for storage, which therefore doesn't create that conflict. So I think there are some really interesting questions to our stagecoach to look into here. Thank you for that. And I'm sensing a really strong feeling in the room around the importance of rail. And did you cover off the March Wisbeach sufficiently? Thank you. So the importance of rail and those rail connections across the region, Ely area, Snowwell, our new potential routes, and also that electrification of East West Rail from day one, and that commitment that we have to that. So I think that's really important that we have that minuted. Are there any more questions on this item? I hope I'd be speaking on behalf of the whole committee to thank all the officers in the team for the amazing work that's going on. There's so much in this. I did personally, as chair, just want to highlight, understandably, we've looked at kind of the big ticket items as we've gone through today, and there are some really impressive big ticket item pieces of work going on. I would also want to draw committee's attention to some of the other work that's happening here. If you look at some of the monthly transport statistics in terms of the amount of bus passes that have been issued, the performance of bus passes, the work in our contact centre, all the work that happens from our teams that perhaps doesn't get the visibility in a committee like this. I very much like to thank those officers for the work that they do to keep the kind of day-to-day running of the network going. So Tim and Steve, if you can potentially pass that on, I'd be very grateful. So thank you. If we have no more questions then on that item, I should say there is no recommendation on this apart from to note, so no vote is needed on this item. So we're now moving on to item 6. This is also a report for noting, and this is the report on e-scooters. And Anna Graham, our transport manager, is going to introduce it. Thank you, Anna.
Good morning. The purpose of this paper is to update members on the developing legislation for e-scooters. When parliamentary time allows, government intends to introduce a new vehicle category of low-speed, zero-emission vehicles. Secondary legislation will enable government to decide which vehicles are placed in this category on a case-by-case basis. Government intends to reclassify e-scooters as LZEVs first, but subject to consultation. In addition to creating a new vehicle class, further legislation will look to introduce a new licensing framework. The licensing framework would cover shared cycles, e-cycles, e-scooters, as well as future LZEVs. Government's current view is that the licensing framework will contain standardised licence conditions, as well as bespoke licence conditions, and an application and appeals process and enforcement powers. The standardised conditions could include a minimum vehicle compliance, technical and safety standards, and data sharing. Bespoke conditions provide the Transport Authority with the flexibility to determine and set specific conditions for the area, which could include fleet size, operating area, approach to e-bike and e-scooter parking, and potentially introduce a fee to operate in the area. With the potential for granting of licensing powers comes the responsibility of not only issuing licenses, but ensuring that the requirement of the licenses are being met and how this work may be funded. So there is further consideration that the Combined Authority will have to do around this. In the meantime, the current trial in Cambridge for the e-scooters continues to the end of May 2024, and the next step for the trials is not yet known. That's just paper.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item, Councillor? It's Simons, isn't it?
Simons. Yeah.
Simons.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, have you got any data on any accidents caused by the e-scooters?
Just want to check if there are any more questions. I'll take them in bunches
sorry.
of 3. If so, oh my goodness, lots. I'll work down this side of the room first. So I'll take Councillor Seaton, then I'll come back down this side and I'll take Councillor Sharp, and then I'll go on to Councillors Shayla and Davenport Ray, but we'll give Ada the chance to answer after Councillor Sharp. So Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think it's a good initiative with the possible introduction of licensing for these type of well, they are vehicles, but I just wonder how that is going to be policed, because it's not easy for the police to keep up with the cars and the lorries that either don't have insurance or don't have tax or whatever. So this is an extra pressure, and I'm just wondering how it can be policed.
My question's touching on that as well. It's the danger, for want of a better word, to pedestrians or older people, where we've got obviously we're pursuing active travel, and we've got shared cycle footways and the dangers there. So that I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And it also raises a really interesting question we might want to come to at a future point around shared use and our policies on that. I'm going to take Chair's privilege, and just because we've got a bunch of items on a similar topic, and I know this is also something that, with my Cambridge representative hat on, residents in Cambridge are also very interested in. There's a lot of use of e-scooters, and a lot of people find them incredibly helpful and really valuable, and they're very popular. But we also get a lot of questions around the promotion of safe use, so safe for residents and safe for the scooter users as well, and how we promote that. So I'd just like to add my voice to those questions around how we promote safety there. So I'll hand that back over to you.
Okay, so the first question regarding safety data, we provide the Department for Transport with reports of any incidents involving an e-scooter. So this is collected on a sort of monthly basis as part of their situation report. So we provide that data which DFT are collecting. So we do have that, and we can sort of share that with you. That's based on people reporting information to us about that. Policing of licensing, so the framework that is being proposed for sort of shared use rental schemes like the one that we have in Cambridge, it would be the combined authority that would issue the license to the operator of that rental scheme. And so that's where I think the combined authority really needs to consider how we then manage that. Do we need an inspector on the ground, making sure that at least the rental e-scooters and e-bike are complying, and that there's no operators that are operating without a license. So that's where the licensing sort of powers are. So there's some questions really for us about how do we want to develop the way that we work and operate sort of future schemes, and actually how many licenses do we want to grant as well, how many operators do we want, where do we want them operating. There's a sort of quite a number of questions that we need to sort of consider with this proposed legislation. The consideration of pedestrians and cyclists. So in the rental scheme, there's something called a geofence, which means that the e-scooters can't operate outside of that geofence. They can be pushed, but they're quite heavy to push without being actually activated. But the system does allow slow ride zones, so where there are high density of pedestrian areas or walking areas, we can it automatically slows the e-scooters down. There's also no ride zone, so if there are particular areas that we don't wish the e-scooters to operate on, that can also be activated. So there is some consideration and care with regard to how the rental e-scooters interact with pedestrians and cyclists. With regard to sort of promoting safe use, so the rental e-scooters we have a system in place around trying to encourage as much training. There's in-app training, which is also incentivised, so that takes people through how to sort of be more considerate when they're riding, and just generally understanding kind of the rules and terms and conditions. Also, when you open the app, it will come up with, you must be 18, you must have a provisional driving licence, which is you have to register your provisional or your full driving licence within the app to be able to hire. But there's also a system as well that if we receive reports of behaviour that on a e-scooter, like riding on a pavement or having more than one person riding, if we know the time and location, we can often sort of identify the user. And if it's the first time that we've had a report of that user, they are given a warning. If we get another report, they can be suspended from the service for a period of time. And if there's a third report, then there's an outright ban for that user, because obviously they're not complying with the terms and conditions of the use of the scooter, as well as the trial requirements. There's also, actually just thinking about, there's also in-person safety events as well that are carried out periodically over the summer, and that also helps to try and promote helmet use, because that's, whilst not a legal requirement, is we encourage that the helmets are used. So there's sometimes promotions of giving out helmets and things like that.
Thank you, Anna. And I just wondered if it might be worth as well clarifying that difference between the legal and licensed use on these schemes and some of the issues that come around the illegal and unlicensed use of scooters that fall outside of this scheme. If you're able to comment on that, that might be helpful.
Yes, so you can buy an e-scooter retail, and I know government have been trying to work with retailers to try and ensure that there's information readily available about where sort of private e-scooters can be used. So they cannot be used on the public highway because they need all the insurances for the rental e-scooter are provided by the operator. Private e-scooters should not be used on the public highway, only on private land, and users could face a fine, penalty points, and having the e-scooter removed, confiscated.
Thank you. Now we have some more questions on this. So I know we have Councillor Shaler and then Councillor Davenport-Ray. Are there anyone else that wishes to speak in this round of questions? Okay, we'll take you both first.
Thank you very much. The scheme that the Combined Authority has been running has been very interesting in terms of gathering data, because we can follow, we have geolocation, and it's a very interesting trial. And I think by and large it's been very successful, certainly in the Cambridge area. My question relates to the privately owned ones, of course. In the highways asset and in transport in general, it's about predictability. You need to know what kind of vehicles you're going to encounter, what speed they're going, and it's when we mix different speeds that we come into trouble. You have to indicate in advance, and all of these things are about knowing what's coming. What is the realistic potential for the Department for Transport to give us some guidance on this absolute plethora of different kind of vehicles? Some of them look like mopeds, some of them look more like motorcycles. So I can imagine a vehicle that, if it's traveling at roughly the speed that you walk at, that should be relatively safe to mix with walking. If it's basically a cycle speed, well, then that should be there, and then the ones that can go much faster should be on the highway. But if they're on the highway, of course, then they have to have third-party, at least, insurance, and all of those things. And it just seems that it's a bit of a black hole at the moment. There's nothing, and so I would be very interested to know what chance we have. Another problem is getting data from the police. We've tried to get data about collisions and what have you, and it's a bit thin on the ground. In terms of active transport in general, it's very difficult to get reliable data on injuries. People tend to hobble home, and there's no paper trail on anything. And given that we want to encourage people to improve their fitness and actually use active transport, the infrastructure should look safe as well as be safe. But do we have any way outside of this scheme that we're running to get this kind of data? Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot there. Do you want to answer those off before coming to the next question?
If I may, and hopefully I've sort of got it all, but the reporting of incidents, you are right. If it's the rider that is sort of involved and it's only them involved in it and there's no other sort of party, that can be, in the rental scheme, can be picked up through the reporting in the in-app. But obviously, outside of that, there's not really that much reporting, although there is, I was just trying to recall, but there is some Stats 19 data that DFT were looking at, so I can have a look at that and sort of try and share that. With regard to sort of the predictability of sort of the vehicles and sort of speeds, that type of thing, one of the areas that DFT are looking at around regulating for the new sort of vehicle class is standardising the type of e-scooter that could be sold, so that it's more in line with the type of e-scooters that are on the rental schemes, where they have sort of more, the size and the weight of them is sort of a set sort of standard, the type of brakes and things like that. So that I think they're looking at how that could be regulated for sort of e-scooters going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Devonport-Ray, and are there any more questions on this item? Over to you.
When the Voice scheme began, I think it was about 2 years ago in Peterborough and Cambridge, it was both e-scooters and e-cycles. And I'd really like to hear more in some future meeting of this committee about the e-cycle aspect. I envisage a couple of more rural locations where I'm hoping we might be able to trial something like that, where you maybe have a market town where we have our new developments on the edge and the train station and the market center in the middle, where we could reduce some of those inner market town journeys. And from speaking to local residents, e-bikes might actually be something they're very interested in. So I'd love to hear more about that in the future.
Thank you. Anna, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yes, that is something that we are looking at. One of the difficulties in sort of smaller population sizes is that it's a bit more difficult to make it look attractive to sort of commercial enterprises, but we are looking at a number of options as to how we can perhaps make it more community sort of based. But yes, we can look to bring a paper forward to this committee at some point in the future when we have a little bit more on that. Okay.
Thank you. And Tim, I think you want to summarise on some of this.
Yes, so just on three of those points, I just wanted to just add a little bit more to. Just around the killed and seriously injured accidents, and that is not just around active travel, but also e-scooters, but that's around all modes of travel. We have a number of incidents that don't get reported, and therefore you don't know where those accident concerns are because they don't get reported on statistics, and therefore decisions are being made on the basis of those the statistics that are reported, and therefore that's an issue that we need to consider both ourselves, but also county and city going forward, especially through the Vision Zero work. The other two things I just wanted to touch on was we are looking at in due course, so we have linked, I think, to Councillor Davenport-Ray comment around looking for a micro-mobility strategy and how that linked in. We're looking to that to be a part of the LTCP suite document going forward. but we need to that work we need to progress, and therefore we need to come back with updates on that and understand where councillors wanted to take that particular work forward. And the final thing is on the e-bikes and that's again also in our LTCP, in a draft LCCP, as part of the option for our market towns, particularly, and also looking at our travel and mobility hubs as having a fully integrated transport network. So you can have options, whether that's active travel, but also looking at how that works with the buses, etc., and how that works as a complete network rather than individual parts and component parts. So we're looking at a truly holistic approach rather than just individual modes. So we need to get away as officers from working about individual modes, more of what they mean for the area.
Just in under the wire there, Councillor Simons, off you go.
Sorry, yeah, just on the Voy cycles, as you know, we had serious issues in Peterborough, vandalism. Could that ever be revisited to talk to Voy about cycles back in Peterborough? It's very successful, apart from the vandalism problem.
Thank you. And Councillor Shaler has a question he'd like to ask as well. I'm going to ask people now, you're coming on to your second round of questions, so to be as brief as we can because we still have 2 items to get through. So, Councillor Shaler.
Thank you. Just to comment that early on in the scheme, we had a lot of statistics on the number of tonnes of carbon saved and the various aspects. I wonder if we could get Voy to give us some more of that. I think that's part of the reporting to the public. The other question is around batteries. We've had some reports of batteries that are catching on fire, and I wonder if this is something that the DFT is also looking at, probably more to do with the private ones, but thank you.
Right, I'm going to do a last call for any more questions as well on this one. Anna.
Just taking the first question, it is something that we're looking at actually as part of our work, looking at trying to provide e-bikes for market towns. One obviously the key lessons that we've learned is around the potential for high level of vandalism, and one of the sort of things that we could potentially look to do is by making it more community based, where you have sort of community sort of partnerships with different charities or organisations. It can actually help reduce vandalism, but it's something that we are sort of exploring at the moment. But yes, a lot of areas, not just Peterborough, have had difficulty with vandalism of those bikes and basic stealing of those of the e-bikes. So it is a problem that a lot of areas are trying to think how best to tackle.
Yeah, I think it's down to storage basically, isn't it? Because I mean, they were just on the side of the road. I think, like you say, if they were stored in community complexes, then it would probably cut a lot of that vandalism out.
Okay, and if I go to the second question regarding about batteries, it is a known issue around sort of thermal issues with the batteries. Within the rental scheme, we have a safe system of working. So if while the batteries are on charge, so all the batteries are charged, but all have a very clear location as to where they're being charged and are monitored. But there's also sort of safety boxes. So if one starts to begin to overheat, it can be safely put into a sort of thermal box, which then protects it from any other batteries. So it's an issue that is known about, but it is managed and monitored.
Thank you. And I'm just going to make an observation from racking my memory back to when I was portfolio holder for streets and open spaces at the city. I think that's something where there's probably a discussion to be had between Peterborough and the providers in terms of finding the right places for storage. I think that's right, isn't it, in terms of offering up potential facilities?
Yes, I think we were looking... there's a potential organisation that has a system where they actually lock the bikes to existing sort of cycle infrastructure and things like that. So there is sort of ways. So it may not be the Voi that would be the operator that would look to go back in there, but we can in the future look at sort of different operators and different systems of working.
Fantastic. And just a reminder, there was a question about carbon as well.
Yes, I'll happily get that information and share that with you. I think from memory, looking, because I just recently were looking at sort of some data, I think it was since we've reduced by 186 tonnes, but I will get that clarified for you.
Thank you. And I think it was really helpful to have this update. I mean, a reminder, because this has been quite a far-ranging conversation. So just for the record, that our report recommendation is to note the developing legislation with e-scooters. But I think this has been an extremely helpful conversation, and there's clearly a lot of interest across our region about e-scooters and also e-bikes as well. So I suspect this is something we'll be coming back to. Now, there was a really good comment from Tim about the importance of integrated active travel networks and making sure that everything is linked up together, which I think we probably all agree is very important, which is a very good segue into our next report item, which is our active travel update. Now, Anna, you're down as presenting the report, but I also see that we have our new active travel officer here. Now, it's Higton, isn't it? Not Highton. Thank you. So I'd also like to welcome Yo Higton, who's our new active travel officer with funding, I think, from the active travel funding that we receive, which is really fantastic. So welcome to you, Yo, and over to you both for the update.
Okay, I'll just do an overview of the paper and then we'll both be available for questions afterwards. So the paper provides an update on the Active Travel Fund 4, an upcoming visit from Active Travel England. It also seeks approval to draw down subject to approval funding from the medium-term financial plan to continue the Love to Ride behaviour change programme across the combined authority area and initiate Living Streets Walk to School WOW programme in Peterborough. So on the 19th of May, Active Travel England announced the outcome of the Active Travel Fund 4 bids, and the combined authority, working with both Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council, were successful in securing about £3.9 million, exceeding the indicative allocation set by Active Travel England for bidding, which was at £2.9 million. The funded projects can be found in the appendix. The drawdown of £55,485.
Anna, I just to stop for a second. Can I check that we have still got the external connection?
Still working on
right
YouTube. Zoom just no one's always timed out.
Okay, thank you. For those who are watching remotely, what I was querying there is we've lost the pictures up on the screens. So I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a problem in our YouTube feed, but there isn't. So Anna, sorry, and please carry on.
No, that's okay. So the drawdown of £55,485 is subject to approval funding from the medium-term financial plan is for the continuation of the Combined Authority area-wide Love to Ride behaviour change programme. The programme would run between September 2023 to August 24 and will include 4 campaigns within a rolling 12-month programme cycle. The Love to Ride is a behaviour change programme that seeks to increase the numbers of people cycling and to make a sustained behaviour change. It looks to encourage non-cyclists to ride and get those already cycling for leisure to do so for transport. The drawdown of £12,000 of subject to approval funding to Peterborough City Council is to initiate a trial of the Living Streets Walk to School programme for 1 year. The funding would enable 8 primary schools targeting between 4,500 to 5,000 pupils across the city to run the Living Streets WOW programme. The paper also included a short outline about the Active Travel England visit on the 21st of June, which invitations have now been sent out with also a full agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Is there anything you... Sorry, Yo, is there anything you want to add to that at this point? So we're going to open out to questions. Has anyone got any questions? We've got Dr. Nick. Anyone else in this round of questions? Councillor Shayler.
Well, okay,
Menick.
thank you. Well, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge publicly, obviously, the arrival of Yo as an active travel advocate working within the Combined Authority, and commend all the officers who've been doing great work in terms of the successful bid, and also then the engagement with constituent authorities across the Combined Authority area. This very much sits comfortably with what I would say are mayoral priorities, particularly around the drive to improve the access and the desire to take on active travel. Active travel has huge levels of benefits, particularly around public health. And I'm grateful that you often remember, to call me Dr. Nick on those occasions, because actually the driving mayoral priority of fourth mayoral priority of working with all local authorities and indeed the Integrated Care Board and the Health and Wellbeing Board about trying to encourage people to take up more exercise through active travel, be it walking, be it cycling, is absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to do here. And I think it's small steps. I mean, I look at those figures and they don't actually scream out large numbers, but you think about the possibilities of going into schools, working with kids at a very early age, trying to get that nudge and change in terms of how we approach getting about our towns and our cities, both at times of going to work, but also at times of leisure. So I'm very delighted to see this, as I'm not able to vote on it, but I would be recommending to all those here, this is very much the way we should be going, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
And just to say, I think you can vote on these items. You are here as a voting member, so you will be able to vote.
I guess even better and better. I can show my absolute joy at these points. Thank you.
Before we go on to the next two answers, Councillor Shayler, and are there anyone else at this point would like to come in? Councillor Shayler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this report. It is one of those optimistic ones. I was yesterday in Cottenham with the junior travel ambassadors from across the county, and it's such an uplifting event. And these children have great ideas, and the way that they learn about the local authorities and how they can engage is just fantastic. And of course, the Active Travel England documents are all about health, and I want to absolutely reiterate that. The change in behaviour is part of it, but I know places like Wisbech, for instance, it might be tricky to get by active transport across the Nene to school, actually. And so there is an aspect of infrastructure and building involved with this. So I thought I'd just mention that and think about possibilities of that. Not only Wisbech, of course, there's many other places that would actually need somewhere for people to walk and cycle. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to you both.
Thank you. There was a question about having a little bit more information about the Living Streets programme. So I just thought I'd explain how it actually works on the ground in the schools. So the children come into school and each school has an online account. And as the children come into school, they can tap on their screen or write down on a piece of paper how they got to school that day, whether it's walking, cycling, scooting, park and stride, or travel by car. So although it's a Living Streets walking initiative, it's actually all active. It's all active travel for the children. And then the data is calculated, so it's really useful data for us to be able to receive on a monthly basis to see how many children within the school are travelling actively. And then any child that travels at least once a week actively over the month gets a badge. And that is the game changer. When you're walking out of school with the badge on your bag, you're the one who travelled actively, and then the parents see the other children, why have they got their badges? And then it's a real it's a bit of a pest of power scenario as well. So I've seen it work in other local authorities, and I think it's a really positive scheme.
Thank you. And Tim, I know you have some updates as well. I just want to say I think we should have badges for committee members who come actively as well. I'm all for that. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, so just on building on Joe's point, but also on some of the feedback we've had, is the three key components around getting active travel right. It's around the 3 E's. So you've got the engineering, so you build it, and build it properly and making it safe. There's the enforcement to make sure that it's you can actually again use it safe. And the other point that what you said is around the education. So the 3 E's are critical parts of the any active travel strategy. And this work that we've spoken about here is definitely addressing the third one of those. The other point was around the use of active travel, specifically in our rural areas. So the DfT last week published its rural accessibility strategy, which the team are going through at the moment, and how that then links with our policy going forward. We're also doing work around feasibility. We will be doing work around rural feasibility, and where we need to challenge back to Active Travel England around the LTN 120 is not appropriate in our rural areas. Therefore, how do we adapt that and therefore not make ourselves liable or city or county when we put things in place? We need to have a pragmatic approach in how we do that. And then when we look at quiet lanes or some initiative, we need to look at how we can actively encourage the safe use of active travel across the whole of our area, and specifically in our rural areas. And the final point is linked to that is if we get them young, then you're building in that behaviours, and then they don't automatically need to look at other alternatives. So we need to make sure that getting them young in a safe environment is a key component to that.
Thank you. Is anything else anyone wants to ask or raise on this item? Now, we have 3 recommendations here. One is to note, 2 are to make an active recommendation that we will need a vote on. Does anyone object to me taking recommendations 2 and 3 on block to vote? Thank you. So before we vote, to note that there is a change to recommendation 2. It currently says to recommend the combined authority approve the drawdown. There's a clarification that should say the combined authority board approve the drawdown, just to be clear. Do we have any objection to taking those 2 votes together? So for the benefit of those watching online, we're going to be voting for both on the drawdown of funding to enable some of these schemes, and also to recommend some delegated authority, which will allow us to move more quickly on some of these schemes. That's a summary of what's there. That's not a word for word. Can I see those in favour of the recommendations, please? I believe I need a proposer and seconder. I moved too quickly. I will propose the recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please? Mayor Dr. Nick will second. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Try again. Can I see those in favour of the recommendations, please? That is unanimous. Just to note that Andy Williams is not voting because the Business Board representative does not have a vote. So that is not an abstention. That is simply not able to vote. Thank you very much. And again, welcome to Yo, and thank you both for the work you're doing and for the work that everyone in your teams is doing. So that takes us now on to the regional transport model. And I believe that Emma White is presenting on this. Emma, if you'd like to come up and present to us on this. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. The recommendations on this paper include: note the progress on the delivery of the regional transport model, recommend that the committee approve the drawdown of 420,000 towards the work for Peterborough City Council, and recommend to the Combined Authority Board to delegate authority to enter a grant funding agreement on this work. During the assessment of recent transport studies, the DfT suggested that the use of an existing suite of models will not be suitable going forward for the use in scheme business cases due to the age of the data and the area of coverage. Previously, this committee and the Combined Authority Board approved the drawdown of funds to commence the regional transport model for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough called CapCan in respect to the Cambridgeshire County Council work. The new model requires the collection of a wide range of data covering all travel modes. The highway data is currently being collected with Peterborough surveys on site from early May and Cambridgeshire surveys on site from late May into this month. There will also be surveys of bus and rail passengers and their usage. The survey costs are now being finalised and are lower than budgeted for. Therefore, the agent-based model covering the same area CapCam has already been commissioned within the existing agreed budget. Previously in January 2023, this committee and the board, it was stated that Peterborough City Council would need funding to cover aligning the PTM4 with CapCam. This model needs updating as it's far more detailed than the CapCam model. Both models will use the same data and be aligned. The final cost for this work is $421,000. Thank you.
Thank you, and that was a fantastically succinct report there. I'm very grateful for that. Does anyone have any questions? We have Mayor Dr. Nick, we have Councillor Davenport-Ray. Do we have any other questions at this point? Mayor Dr. Nick, please.
Thank you. Yeah, my memory of this as a proposal coming forward as a suggestion came from within the Combined Authority. And it was one of those proposals which was met, as I understand it, by all constituent leaders and sort of chief execs as a perfect example of collaboration and the benefits of a combined authority. As such, I'm assuming most people will just want to say, yes, this is how much it costs, this is what we need, and it's a great paper in terms of succinctly put over as to why we should be doing it. I just wanted to add the other potential question relevant to point 3.2, and when it says the proposed new model for the area will enable testing of multiple schemes for a wide range of end users. Now, obviously, there's ourselves, and we've got big plans and we want to move forward. Constituent members who obviously agreed, and they'll feel they want to use this as a resource. But with regards to that final point of developers, is this an opportunity of a potential income stream where we're using the resources, what we've paid for, that the information we will be able to provide, developers then pay for it? So in a way, this can help pay for itself.
If it's okay, I'll take the questions in bunch. So, Councillor Davenport-Ray, and are there any further questions at this point?
Thank you, Emma. I'm actually really excited to see the results of this project. The region of the mayoralty has such a complex mixture of different transport modes. I don't think I've ever seen a comprehensive picture of all of it, so I'm looking forward to seeing the result. But I also accept that it's not going to be easy because of that large mixture. So yes, I look forward to that. In section 3.2 that the mayor was just discussing, that list of people we want to consult, I'd encourage you to add post-16 education to that list. Not only are they a great user of public transport, but in some cases they are providing transport to their students that otherwise we would not be able to capture into the model. And so my only question really is, what happens next? What's the timeline? When will we see something come back to us at this committee?
Thank you. And I would like to add to the point on post-16 education. As some of you will know, I'm a former post-16 teacher and school leader myself, and over the years I've seen many students struggle to get to the course that is right for them because transport is either not available or too expensive. So this is a really, really important issue. So thank you for raising it, Councillor. Emma.
So in terms of the first question about charging developers, 100% correct. There's I've been talking with both PCC and CCC about ways we can take it forwards, and yeah, that's something that they're looking into already as an option. And in terms of post-16 travel, I have a meeting with both CCC and PCC this afternoon on this project, so I will raise that as something that needs to be followed up. And where we've commissioned the agent-based modelling, that will give even more information. It's a lot more detailed about policies and public transport we can look at in the model. So I think by the survey costs coming in lower, we can actually get even more from the model. In terms of deadlines, the surveys have been put back a little bit and are actually happening in May and June. Therefore, the programme shifted slightly. CCC and PCC are working on this at the moment and plan to give me some more information on an updated programme over the next few weeks, which I'm happy to share on email to everyone and give an update at the next committee.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this one? I think just as a representative for a district council, which is also a planning authority, I can imagine that the districts will also want to be linked into that developer information in terms of informing the planning processes. So that would be great to have that happen. Tim, I think you have some points to raise.
Yeah, so just on the post-16 education, myself with Fliss Miller in the Combined Authority are working with the post-16 education to understand some of the needs and complex needs that there are, and that will also feed into some of the work that we'll hear about that Neil Bars is doing on the network review around how we look at accessing key locations, and that is education, but also that is employment zones, etc. There's a whole raft that plays into that network review, but ultimately, just to give you all confidence that myself and Fliss are having those active discussions with post-16 education.
Thank you. And Emma, I wanted to say a huge thank you to the work that you and your team are doing here, because I'm very aware this is just a small part of the incredibly hard work that you're doing to look at our transport modelling and structures. So thank you for spending the time on this. Are there any further questions on this item at this point? So we will go to the report recommendations. I will not forget to propose and second it this time around. I just wanted to check with, I'm not sure which officer to check this with. When it's, the recommendation here is for us to approve the drawdown. That's because board has already allowed us, hasn't it, in the past to approve drawdown of these funds. Is that correct? Thank you. So that is a correct recommendation there. That's good to know. So again, does anyone have any objections if we take these en masse? For the benefit of those who are listening and don't have the agenda in front of them, there is a recommendation to approve drawdown of funding for the delivery of work by Peterborough City Council on the Peterborough transport model as part of the works for this, and also to, again, delegate authority to ensure that our decisions can be made as quickly as possible on the grant funding as part of this. So that again is a summary of those, but just for the benefit of those watching online. So I will propose the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Oh, I think Councillor Davenport-Ray just got in there, so Councillor Davenport-Ray will be seconding. Are we all okay with that? Sorry. Yeah. Do we have then votes in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we are now moving on to item 9, which is the Transport and Infrastructure Committee Agenda Plan. Does anyone want to introduce this agenda plan item, or should we just go straight to questions? So does anyone have any questions or comments on the future agenda plan? Okay, well, that is an item to note. That's an ongoing item. And I think we have raised a couple of things earlier in the agenda of things that we're keen to talk about in future meetings. And a reminder, this is a really good opportunity to raise that, because as a committee, we obviously want to own the agenda that's coming forward there. Before I get to the date of next meeting, I did just want to say a particular thanks to Mayor Dr. Nick for attending today. I think it shows very clearly the importance of transport and integrated transport and public and active transport to the Combined Authority under his mayoralty. And I think Nick taking the time to attend today's meeting is a really good example of that. So thank you for coming. Now, the committee is due to meet again on Wednesday, the 12th of July, 2023. Please note that online and on the published papers, that says Monday, the 12th of July. That is an error. It is Wednesday, the 12th of July. Are there any further comments on anything before I declare this public meeting closed? Thank you very much. Councillor Shaler.
Sorry, just sneaking that, just on forward agenda, is there an opportunity for us to get a pre-look at the agenda, and because tends to come quite quickly before the meeting, and I don't know if it'd be helpful for others, but and for officers that we get a chance to look at that a little bit further in advance.
So I'll ask officers to comment, but I think the idea with the forward plan is that all the major items should be coming forward on that. But I wonder if we can, if we don't do so already, ensure that the moment that those agenda items are, that those agendas are published, we make sure that the committee is informed of that.
Yes, and there is a general forward plan, the CA general forward plan that has the items on there before they get put onto the committee's forward plan. So you can always look ahead for items that are coming up.
Thank you, and that's a really good tip for us all to make sure that we're looking at the full combined authority forward plan as well to see what might be feeding through into our agenda items. So thank you. And with that, I declare the public meeting closed. Thank you very much. Right, we're offline. We are going to move on, and I hope that most people